Okay, so welcome back. Now we are going to continue on the Global Foresight Summit. As you know, this year we are hosting the event together with the APF and the WFR. We repeat the acronyms again. It's the Association of Professional Futurists and the World Futures Review, a journal of strategic foresight. In this session, you see a lot of faces on the screen because today we are going to be talking about foresight communities, and there is nothing better in a community than a lot of people. So we have Tanja and John. You already know them. They've been with us yesterday, and I think John has been today, this morning too. And they are going to be introducing the rest of the participants in this roundtable, and they will be also moderating the roundtable. So, John, Tanja, you go along. Everything is on your side.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. And yeah, we're super excited about the session, but we also haven't done such a large session with that many people. So we will see how this will go. But thank you all for being here. Thanks for listening. I shortly introduced myself since we did it last time, then hand it over to John. And then basically, I just want you to follow the lead. So basically what we're going to say is who you are, and what communities you belong to in Futures, and what's your favorite part about that. So I'm Tanja. I am part and the founder of FutureSpace, a peer-to-peer learning community, but also the vice chair of the APF, where we kind of revamping the experience of that network and community as well. And I feel I've been in communities all my life because I traveled along all over the world, and I always feel at home. So for me, community is really finding and building a safe space of exchange and support and inspiration. Hand it into you, John.
Thanks, Tanja. My name is John. I am, I guess, a member of tons of futures communities, World Future Studies Federation, World Future Society back in the day. Of course, a member of the Association of Professional Futurists. I was one of the founding sort of members at the meeting of the Asia Pacific Futures Network Conference. I'm a co-founder of the Participatory Futures Global Swarm. I've been collaborating with Michell and the awesome team at Envisioning. Wow, actually, I feel like I get around a lot. So for me, what I love about that is I don't know how to do futures any other way. For me, futures happens in communities. So I think from my perspective, it's the only way to do futures. And he's our special guest star because he wasn't announced, but I'm going to toss it to him next and then ask him to toss it to someone else. So Joost Wagner is with us. Joost, please answer the questions and then pass it along.
So when you come late, you have to be the first to answer the questions. Thanks very much, John. Hello, Tanja. Hello, colleagues. Hello, everybody. My name is Joost. I'm a futurist and facilitator based in Bangkok, and I'm representing here the Asia Pacific Futures Network, although there are several people who belong to that community as well, especially John, who was one of the founding members, as you said. And yeah, I mean, I've been part of this community for 4 or 5 years. It has become my home. And I co-organized two physical APFN conferences in Bangkok. And with Sophia, who's also on the call, I'm organizing primarily the next digital APFN in September. And it's meeting friends, it's knowledge exchange. And recently we also try to bring in policymakers much more in the last 2 or 3 years. So it's also a place for matchmaking so that our work goes not only from foresight to insight, and it actually is going to action. We make an impact. So, and I toss it over to Sophia, my partner in crime.
Yes, I knew I would be next. Hi, I'm Sophia. Well, I got my start in futures a little over 1.5 ago with APFN, so I can qualify myself as a member there. I've been living in Southeast Asia for a couple of years now. And I am also just stepping into the role of community manager at Future Space. And I'm on the periphery of a couple of other informal learning communities. I'm also participating in the APF transformation year as a volunteer on several task forces. And yes, I'm a member of the Future School and doing my Certified Foresight Practitioner course there at the moment. So yeah, like I said, lots of informal and formal learning communities. And what I love about that, well, I've only been doing futures really since September 2019, but it's been rapid because I have been enabled to come as I am and learn what I want and kind of figure out what emerges from there. I've been able to just kind of craft my own journey, and it's never been a dull moment. So it's, like I say, forever and a lifetime to go. And next will be Victor.
Thank you, Sophia, and thank you for inviting me, Tanja. Well, so there's a lot of communities that I'm a part of. So I created using Foresight, which is my really powerful project that I'm working on. I'm a moderator for Future Space for Tanja. I'm also a co-organizer for a speculative futures chapter here in Phoenix, Arizona. And I'm also just recently joined the Gray Swan Guild, which is another global sense-making community, which I don't think many people are aware of, but it's an awesome community as well. And I'm also a part of Envisioning and the Global Swarm. I'm just there, just looking at things. How do they work things out? And I think the best part for me when it comes to futures thinking and the communities is I really do enjoy individual futures, but for me personally, a collective futures is where that's where the impact really makes it, right? All right, and I'll pass it to Bibi.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Bibi. I'm the Global Community Manager for the APF, quite recently and very gratefully. I also, I'm part of the research for the Images of the Future and Co-Creation Chair at UNESCO. I'm a wallflower member of Envisioning community. I'm a wallflower member of the Guild of Swans, and so I try to see what's going around. Hi, Majd. Is that how I pronounce your name?
No, hello.
Hey there. Hey there. And I think I've been doing futures, both corporate. I've been doing futures in a corporate sense for 3 years. Big brands, Coca-Cola, Delta Airlines, international brands trying to understand their position in the future. And more recently, I've come to a part of advocacy futures where I really want to think of society and values and things like that. With that, I'm part of a founding member of Polifuturos in Brazil, trying to bring futures literacy as a way to resist collapse, basically, which is something that we really need in times like this, and create new images of the future that we can maybe build upon. But I've been doing communities for over 10 years. And then my challenge here, or my invitation for you guys, would be for us to think, are we thinking futures communities, or are we thinking communities of the future, or are we thinking the future of communities? Because I do believe that as the world gets more distributed, we have more and more need for communities, strong communities. And I think in communities is where we see the praxis of our work. So Chris Meyer early on mentioned or brought an invitation on thinking of values and ethics as a way to enhance futures. And Ria was just saying about values as well. And I think in communities, and especially in futures communities, is where we are able to walk the talk, I guess. So that's what brings me here, and what makes me really happy to be part of the communities I'm part of is that so far we've been walking the talk. And I'll call Majd because I really want to know if I'm saying that right. I think he's frozen. So I'll call on April.
Thank you, Bibi. Yes, I'm Abril. I'm from Mexico City, and I've been building communities since over 10 years. I used to be creative director in advertising agencies, so that was my core business, like to create communities with brands. And then almost a year ago, I like flipped my own script, and I've been working with John and Jose. And I'm chief pollinator of the Participatory Global Swarm. I've also been in some sessions with Tanja in Future Space, and also in the Journal of Future Studies. We're trying to rise a community between the editors and the authors and our readers, and as well as the Mutant Futures Academy with Jose Ramos. We're trying to build also a community there. So it's been quite a ride, and it has been grateful, and it has been like a roller coaster for me to be part of all these communities. I've been like also been like in Envision talks, so it's been like an amusement part for me in order to build communities. And I love the way that everyone is so welcoming, that it doesn't matter which community you are, or if you are for example, I'm representing the Global Swarm right now, but even though I can be in any other of the communities, and that's amazing, like that sense of camaraderie and group, and like John said at the beginning, like to build futures together, that will be the only way. It doesn't matter what name or tag you have or in which community you belong to. Like that ability to shape-shifting and to learn from others, that I think that's the most important thing for me, and that's why I'm here, and that's why I like to represent this in this part of the Global Foresight Summit too. And I pass it to Michelle.
It's an honor to be in the room with you guys. This is really cool. Thank you. And as someone who's always been sort of fascinated by the future, it's exciting to see the interest be taking off so much. And I think I can only concur with what's been said. The community has never been more welcoming. And I like how the transversal, how it's a transversal skill. It's no longer a dedicated subject matter. It's something we bring to other subjects. And I think the challenge is, how do we reduce future fatigue? Because it can get tiring to spend so much time thinking about what's next. And I think that's where I find myself a little bit. And being in this room with you guys is refreshing because of that. Thanks.
My therapist always mentions how to come back to the present. When I start going way too much into the future, she's like, okay, but how do you come back to the present? And I think communities are a great way to do that, because we are present when we are together. So it's something that we are doing in the present that may or may not affect the future, but just by being together, we feel happy and we create connections and we create affections that might go even beyond ideas, might be just like by knowing you guys, we do things together then, and then we do things in a new way or with new values or in a like collaborative, non-competitive way, and then we're building the future. I guess that's it. There's images of the future, of a far, far future that we go there, but then there is us in the present having these conversations, getting to know each other.
So I think Majd is back. I see. Maybe he wants to say something.
Sorry, guys. Technical problems.
Perfect.
Hey, Matt.
Go, John.
Go ahead. No, I was gonna say, Matt. So we just did introductions. So who are you? What community are you representing? And what do you love most about Futures Communities?
Yeah, thank you, Jean. Hi, all. Hope you're doing good. My name is Majd Assi from Damascus, Syria. I'm a junior futurist, a member of the Participatory Future Global Swarm. I represent the Syrian community, I would say. I aspire to use the foresight and future thinking to inspire Syrian youth and Syrian community of all ages and backgrounds to think more of the future as a community that holds all members of the community as one, like to think of more as global citizen rather than to think of as one nationality. And one of the things I think that future communities must have is that the ability to think global, as each member matters for the better of the humanity, not for their country. What I'm looking for is to work with the Syrian youth and community to try to think more of our future as one destination that we are all going to. And with that, maybe trying to collaborate and to share ideas in disregard to all the differences. I think it's very, very critical in these times.
Thank you so much for that. I just really love what Abril was saying about that it doesn't matter which community you belong to. And I really feel there is an emerging shift. And then you can see representing by today that we are all active in multiple communities. And really the goal is to bring in the futures from there to the outside and to engage more with that. So I would love to hear some more experience that you had within your communities, within new members that you got in, and to do that. So whoever wants to share some of your experience.
Hey, well, Victor, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think at the beginning when I first started with Future Space, no, not only Future Space, but the whole Futures community, the whole Futures field in 2015, I didn't realize the kind of communities were out there. I know World Future Society, before they changed management, they had chapters from, throughout the whole world. And I did participate and met up with my Phoenix chapter here, but then that kind of changed. And ever since then, I just tried to go and find the new communities that's being built out there. And throughout the whole years after that, and especially in 2019 and 2020, last year was when I found out Tanja was launching her Future Space community. And that's the first community that I kind of joined in, right off the bat. And I didn't realize what kind of things it wanted to be at first, but then now it's transforming into that kind of community that I was seeking, a community where people from all over the world can come together and participate and use the foresight tools that they've been learning, throughout the whole career or the past year, or if they just started recently, like myself, then that's the kind of community that I was looking for. And I was really grateful that I found that. And since then, I wanted to do more. So I created other ones, I joined other ones. But with Future Space, I wanted to create something that was fun. So I created the Multiverse Conversation, which is, one day a month, just getting together in a conversation like how we are in today. And the conversation is just a starting point using sci-fi and pop culture references. And so that's one way that we kind of, just, I guess, go away from the usual foresight practitioner workshops and Zoom meetings to a more of a laid back, chill, hangout conversation, just talking about movies, about self-driving cars, artificial intelligence, or even just the house of the future. And that's the kind of fun things that I like to do, being a part of fun events, fun communities, and I'm hoping to see more of that.
I'll share my experience because it was really interesting for me. 2019, I saw that the Millennium Project were opening for hosts. They do the 24-hour Futures Day, and they didn't have anyone for my time zone at the time. So yeah, sure, I can facilitate. Then I facilitated, And it was amazing. I think you guys who have participated on the Futures Day know how it goes, and the conversations just really flow. And I made friends, and all of a sudden I was having Saturday conversations with people that I would call, when I say that with all the love in my heart, and they know that, my old crazy friends. And there was like the guy who invented AI, and the guy who invented AI for the CIA, and then the guy who invented internet was in it one day. And I'm looking at my husband saying, I'm talking to the guy who invented the internet. And it was amazing because it was the first time that I saw subjects that were so far out being discussed, and coming from a corporative world. So I come from a corporate, business-driven, and then they're discussing, I don't know, other words, the impact of us meeting the aliens, and what would that be like, and I don't know, values on Earth and how to save the planet. So it was amazing to be welcomed by a community that was so different from myself, which was the Millennium Project community. And I was super welcomed by Jerry and by Heiner, who became my great friend. And that was my entering into the global world, I guess. And from there, I got to know APF and other things. But I love how like this young, out of nowhere girl, women really, but for them, just like out of nowhere person came in and they accepted me. And even if I was talking a lot of things that were new or that were right in their visions, they really accepted me, and they accepted the diversity I was bringing. So that was a great experience. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Heiner.
I am going to jump in because I really feel related on what Victor and Bibi just said. Like, I was used to be in a community here in Mexico where it was like a toxic community that you have to have a specific profile in order to fit in. And then I suddenly came here, and then it was like, just like you, Bibi, was saying, like this part of an amazing community where it doesn't matter your job title, it doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter if what amount of experience you have in futures or not, but it's a safe space where you can feel that you can be weird, that you can be allowed to be weird, and that's been like amazing. And that's something that, for example, in the Swarm is happening. Like, it's a horizon. Well, I don't like that term a lot, but a horizontal community, like where it's not a pyramidal. Like, hey, there's John, the co-founder, and Jose, and the rest of them, but you can chat whoever you want. Like, it doesn't matter who they are, where they are, and this past year I've been making friends all over the world that I think that I consider them more my friends than my actual friends from here. So it's been an amazing experience that I think that thinking about the futures enable this part of diversity, and that I think that that's very important.
Guys, there's a question here. I know that we are going to have questions in the end, but someone is asking, is there any website we can find about futures communities? And then maybe this is a proposition for us, right? To commune our communities into somewhere that people can see where they are, because it is a bit like going on a hunt, right?
We need a web ring.
Yeah, it is something we discussed in preparation of this meeting, and we're also trying to gather together another open space at the end of the conference on Thursday. So look out, there will be probably another announcement to really have this discussion about if someone really wants to get into all those communities, all those networks, and get informed of the future, where would they look? So we may need to have a platform that combines all of that and highlights all the things that are happening within the futures field. So everyone who's interested in building that with us, I think shout out, reach out to us. And this is a starting point today, a great conference to exactly go towards that, getting more transparency about all the things that are happening there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question to tackle, and a really big challenge, because I do see a lot of events happening here and there from different communities. And if there's something that's interesting for someone that they should be, participating, then they should be the first people to know. So for example is with my Using Foresight media project that I'm currently working on, I'm hosting an event next weekend called Pitch Your Future. So this is like a Shark Tank event, but it's going to be on Clubhouse. So I'm going to be inviting 5 professional futurists, foresight practitioner, futures researcher, or a forecaster, and such, and all those titles that's out there in the foresight community, just inviting them, and then inviting anyone else, whether they are from the foresight community or from the general public. And this is where it gets, to be the fun part, because I've noticed that there's a lot of communities that's, a lot of workshops, presentations, and that's, really awesome and informative. But with Using Foresight, my project, I'm trying to make it more of a fun space for everyone. So with this Shark Tank event next weekend, people can come up on stage just presenting their own personal futures or a future of something else, and then the sharks, the futurists and such, are able to communicate, what are their ideas, thoughts, and is there anything else that they want to mention to the person that is a desirable and achievable future, just using their background, their expertise, and getting to that mainstream of, this is what we do, this is what we are, and everyone is, everyone is involved in creating a future.
Thank you.
Maybe as if we did. Oh, sorry, Tanja, go on.
There was another question in the chat, and I wanted to ask Michelle if you could answer that. And this was about, there are so many communities out there, and how do we get the connection within this to companies? And I think you are exactly building kind of like this relation with the community that you built and helping this to solve within companies, right?
Yeah, so that's part of the problem we're trying to solve. And interestingly, the fact that we're meeting on Slack means there's a cutoff of sort of the kind of people who will actually show up. So I think part of the organizational challenge is like, where's the community hosted? Is it a dedicated website? Is it a third-party solution? Is it a mailing list? Because all of these have communities, Facebook groups, Signal groups, and so on and so forth. And I think the fact that we're on Slack is a limitation, but it also facilitates a certain approximation of the corporate crowd, at least those who use Slack. So I don't have a good answer to the question, but I feel the challenge of knowing where the meetings happen will end up shaping the group significantly, because there is so much offer. I mean, each and every one of us to some degree is hosting our own community, and the fact that they overlap, I think, is what makes it work. But yeah, but bringing that capacity into the professional setting, I think that's a grander challenge.
Yeah, and there's another interesting question here around sort of, communities waxing and waning. And of course, communities change over time. So, the World Future Studies Federation was founded in the early 70s and looks very different now compared to how it did then. And of course, since then we have professional associations like APF, but this massive proliferation of futures communities, which of course, on the one hand is a signal of health, but also can lead to fragmentation, right? Also can lead to this transversal dimensionality that Michelle was talking about, but it also means there's 1,000,001 different names for futures practice and process. So I guess that's a question that, to kick back to the group, what does it mean when there are seemingly as many communities as there are, futurists or whatever people are calling themselves?
Yeah, someone mentioned on the chat that no one agency should have the control or centralization. And what I see and what I love is that in walking the talk for at least the APF, what we're doing is moving from a very centralized model to a decentralized model and a more community model. We are not in a totally decentralized yet, but we're going there. And I guess that answers part of the question. And someone mentioned the futures organizing model is flawed. The future organizing models is something very broad, and I wouldn't answer for all of it. But I think what this group is talking about here is exactly new governance and new organizational models for futures communities to interact and to be way more open and inclusive so that people can join in.
Yes, and also I think that well, talking about the experience with the global storm is that and not just the storm, I've noticed that in any other communities that we are fostering, like not just for professionals but enthusiasts of the future, and I think that that's very important in order to create a more future literate world. So that means that it doesn't matter if you are going to be building your career around futures, but then you're going to start asking yourself about the future, like personal futures or organization futures or communities future. It doesn't matter what that, but that incentives futures thinking, and I think that that's amazing. An example in our community, we have from designers like tech guys, like futurists and different tier levels on around that, and I think that has been amazing. That we know that we have to work a lot in order to foster all this kind of diversity that we have in our community, and how we can interconnect all those skills that we have around communities in order to bring more interesting topics, and just not to try to talk in an academic way or in a practitioner way, but a more relaxed, as Victor was saying, in a more relaxed way, because it's a broader, like futures world. It's like I don't know, it's something that you never stop exploring. So I think that that's very amusing, and that's a challenge that we all have in order to really create this kind of spaces. And how do we bring enthusiasts of the futures and practitioners? So I think that that's one of our challenges.
I agree with April, and I will quickly add to that me myself, coming from a marketing and communication background, I can very much relate to the fact that marketing by itself has like over 180 definitions, like formal definitions. And I think if we got the approach to the future thinking and foresight, we can very much relate that there's no one definition of the future. Like each one person has its own definition. If you ask a physicist or a futurist or a marketing guy, everyone will claim that they have the answer from their own perspective. And I think that moving from, as you said, like from the centralized or a few group of futurists to a whole group of mass futurists, like in communities and nations, I think future thinking must become an essential life skill for each person. Into thinking, we used to call it, and we still call it, like career planning and personal planning, and there's courses around that. So I think that maybe it's a result, it's a normal result that with time along we will be seeing like types of future thinking, like the chemistry future thinking, like the future, we call it like the future of X, and it's very normal to see that. But I think it's a human need right now in this uncertain, ambiguous times we live in, especially after COVID. It becomes a need, not a want. In a marketing sense, it becomes a need that we need to have some clue of the future. We need to have some facts, some visions. I need to know where I will be in the future and how I can contribute. And the same question can be asked to the futurist itself.
I want to pose a question back to the moderators, building on that, which is, what do you guys, because both Tanja and John are in a meta position, you're part of several networks, and I want to pose the question to you, which is, what do you feel is missing in the field? Like, how could the field be more effective, given that it's so transversal?
Me first. It matches a little bit with the question someone asked in the chat, how did I found the Futures community? So I can explain why I founded Future Space. And this was basically out of my own needs. I came back from university and I felt I want to have the safe space back that we had at Swinburne, where I did my master's in Australia, where you can just go nuts and crazy. And it doesn't matter if you're a beginner, a learner, or an expert of futures, but you can have a conversation about the future. And then having my future self who was working in corporate, and I was the crazy person trying to bring futures into the organization, and felt alone as well, because I felt I'm the only person who wants to bring in new, and others were like, oh, what are you talking about? So Future Space then was really the idea of creating something where you either we want to bring it into an organization or you're just starting. You can just be there and have a conversation. And it now has been transformed into something that is also about future activists. And we'll be thinking about where can you actually, as a whole global community of futures thinking, also think about how do we think about the future and how can organizations maybe learn from that. For me, the ground essence is that it's always about collaboration. And I was shocked getting in the field that there is so much competition amongst, besides futurist practitioners and even some communities. And my goal, also now being vice chair of APF, is really to say, hey, we all have one goal. This is like democratizing futures and getting out there. And the more we just being and fighting about ourselves and who we are and having this identity issue, the more energy we lose to engage others. And I just really, really love to see that we all put together. And it doesn't matter where you belong to. And it's almost like striving the uncertainty to not belong into one community, but having the goal to foster all of the people in the communities to speak with their external world, and bringing futures like that.
I don't know if John wants to say something on the question, but I would just like to jump in because I think Tanya's answer just answered two questions on the chat that I think are very important. The first being, we don't need to compete. Actually, if we have a website, if we have a place where we are all there, then the interest of the people will drive them one way or the other. So if I'm interested in technology, I'll gravitate towards envisioning very naturally. If I'm interested in an open, creative space, safe space, I'll gravitate towards future space. And if I'm a professional futurist, I might gravitate towards APF and so on and so forth. So I think this collaboration will only strengthen us all and not weaken us all. So this is very walk the talk for me. And then someone, Osmar here, asked, how did the pandemic change the future tools? What flaws and odds we realized in our work? I think this is very important. I will give my answer. And then, of course, everyone's more than welcome to give their own answers. We didn't follow our own advice. We knew it was coming. It was said by several people in several journals in several ways. And we weren't activists enough. We didn't do enough advocacy to prevent. So I believe there's a responsibility in futures. If we see something coming, then you have to call the geese, alert the geese. You have to be the first one to call the flag and say, hey, there's something going on. I don't see the tools changing very much. What I do see is the community grew stronger because of the internet. So that's one silver lining. But I do think that we need to work on advocacy together. It's not just storytelling. It's not just narrative. It is real, and we cannot have another COVID or hopefully diminish the risks of climate change.
Yeah, I would just jump in really quick before we toss it back to the group. I would maybe say the opposite. We're going to have another COVID. We're going to be blown away by climate change. In fact, there's no way we can future-proof any organization, any government, any company. It's simply impossible to say that we could, with any degree of certainty, know what the future would be in any meaningful way. We can, of course, try to shape the future, and that's, of course, why we do futures. But there is this kind of lingering sensibility of, okay, we have to somehow get better because of what happened, and we should always be getting better. COVID shouldn't have been necessarily a wake-up call. Of course, we're dealing with it at a personal level and trying to make sense of it. But I know one of the things that it actually reaffirmed so much of what I felt before. And I was quite privileged to get a PhD in future studies, study with one of the founders of the field, come up in the Manoa school community, and have a chance, of course, to be connected to different futures communities. And I think what's what's really amazing about this conversation is, again, I think the sign of a healthy futures broadly defined community is when we have this explosion and proliferation, right? An ecosystem. You have this diverse array. So, there's so many communities not represented here. We've got, of course, like Afrofuturist communities. We've got, decolonial and, indigenous futures communities. Like there's so many communities that are overlapped, and people have these, I'm going to use the word tribal identities, right? And so back to Michelle's, I feel like I've been privileged to have this sort of tribal identities and run with different tribes at different times. And I think, there's a healthiness to that. And so that would be something I'd love to, toss it out to the group in relation to the question and Bibi's reflections. How do we enhance that sensibility where, people can invest in different identities? Because if there's one thing we seem to need in this very uncertain future, it's maybe a range of different identities and engaging with different tribes.
I'm going to jump in, John, with what you just said about, because they're answering the question that can anyone speak to how they founded a futures community, and talking about the pandemic and the global swarm that we talked yesterday, that everything started with a report. And then suddenly for the pandemic, it allows us to do gaming sessions online. And then more and more people came in, and it was amazing. And it's not just because of the pandemic, but we realize how tools can enhance different spaces, in not just a physical space as we know it, but also in many other ways. Like you could be, like, for example, I was talking with a friend, like just sending a letter. Like, how do you bring a community by sending a letter? That it's a vintage way of communicating, but how do you communicate on that? I have a friend from the Speculative Futures London, and we were talking about how if we create our own book club, like it would be amazing. And like those kind of things of fostering and this kind of imagination. And it doesn't matter, as John was saying, like how do we keep iterating? And it's like this never-changing world that keeps bringing us to look for new ways and to look for transformation and like agility. I think that's very important to highlight.
I would just say that some of my favorite places are definitely the futurist communities, but as I mentioned before, I'm part of so many informal learning communities. I'm on Facebook, and I'm in a million different communities, from everything about psychedelics to stuff that's not safe for work, to different cultural groups like imagining indigenous futurisms, to all kinds of stuff. And I have my role in those different groups. In some groups, particularly, for example, indigenous groups, I listen a lot more. And I don't say anything, because that's a space where I'm there to confront some of the things that I haven't necessarily grappled with in my place in the whole paradigm of colonial structures and everything like that. In other groups, I contribute things. So what I would really recommend to people, I mean, it's fascinating to be within our groups, but as we are people who are connecting dots, people and ideas and everything, it's so good just to kind of pop into places that you'd be really surprised by, because there are things that are on the fore of futurist conversation, or that are not on the fore of futurist conversations, but if you hung out on Black Twitter, you would know that certain things are coming to like the mainstream, like January 6th, for example. So there's things that can be learned, and it's just so, also, I mean, it's about diversity. We're not planning for one future, we're planning for innumerable futures. So really just being able to learn to empathize and sit with other people and sit with yourself and what those things call up in you, because self-examination is really important, and unlearning things is the most important thing. Being metacognitive is the most important part of being a futurist. And by engaging in as many different places as you can and as many different modalities as you can, that's going to help enrich your practice and just, I mean, your way of being.
I actually graduated from a College of Global Futures. So with that, my expertise is entirely just focused on innovation in society. So I don't have the technical background like engineers or physicists or anthropologists or any of the other, professional careers. For me, I learned from my program is what's the best way to gather people from different communities? How can I get an engineer to come and collaborate with someone from, the arts? So that's my whole background, is just understanding how can I get a whole group of diverse people, to come together? How do I get that conversation going? And how can we continue that conversation? And so with this, I realized that there's so many communities out there, and the kind of communities I want to create, but I also do redirect people to those communities as well. And that's something that I'm good at, which is something that I figured out that's something that I should be doing in this Foresight community and the Foresight world moving forward. And I'm just really, just excited for this whole cross collaboration that Bibi was just talking about, and the kind of perspective that Sophia was mentioning, because I do go and participate in other communities and just listen. But because I know where I am, what I do, and if there's someone that represents or has a really better understanding of this topic, then I would rather just learn and just learn what they have to say, and just use that for even further for something else, for another I guess event. Just bring that perspective with us to the other communities, just spread the word, spread the knowledge, and just spread the encouragement.
Maybe I would like to add something on that. For me, future thinking communities are very, very important, because I need a space where I meet my fellow futurists, however you define yourself, where I can share, where I can learn, make friends. But the reason why I joined the Foresight and Future Thinking community, like many of us, I think I'm one of Sohail Inatullah's victims who found me and dragged me into the Futures community, although he was 20 or 25 years ago a guest lecturer at my university. That time, no Facebook and so on, so we lost touch. But about 8 years or 7 years ago, we connected, and I started organizing his course in Bangkok and bringing all my clients, my development experts from different UN agencies, GIZ, and God knows whom, into the course, and then people were spreading out and doing futures. This is why I need a future thinking community to have a home. But what I really want to do is, what I'm really interested in is, and I'm doing it partly with some of you already in this call, so I'm working with John, going out and fight a short-termism. Because when I do, as a professional facilitator, I do workshops with the UN, with GIZ, and they bring their partners. I have a lot of secretaries of state, directors, and so on from different ministries in the call, or actually in a physical workshop before COVID. They think maybe 1 year ahead, 3 years ahead, 5 years ahead, because that's how the project works. That's how when the next election is. They don't think long term, right? So I think we as futurists have to go out and facilitate workshop, or whatever your skill is. If you're more the writer or more the facilitator, I think the latest word is participatory futures or democratic futures. As a facilitator, it was always for me that. So co-create futures with these people, that they actually create the cities we want, or the climate change, we fight it, and so on. I mean, many people think so narrow. So I think it has, some of you also mentioned already, I think it has to be a skill, futures literacy for everybody. So some of us are going out to schools, and that's so great. So I live in Thailand. I mean, the school system is so la-la. I mean, generally, many people memorize only things, but everybody knows mind mapping. I mean, when I arrived 15 years in Thailand ago, every kid could do mind mapping. They couldn't do self-reflection or criticizing their professor or their teacher, but they could do mind mapping. And I'm dreaming that maybe, for example, in many Asian countries where there's a lot of hierarchy and respect for the elderly, that they learn futures literacy already at school. So we, as a community, have a very important role to play, and we can't do it alone. So we need our peer group. So just thinking loud here. Hopefully it made sense. Thanks.
I guess it made complete sense, at least for me. And with the last question that came in, Osmar was saying that we need to realize that the future is a territory under dispute. And then we're entering the field of macropolitics here, but addressing power dynamics and who has actually the power to drive the future. Otherwise, we're just sitting and storytelling to each other here, right? Creating new images of the future that may or may not have any impact or relevance. And what you just mentioned is that you at least get some important people listening to what you were saying. You have some good partners. So it's top down in a way that you have partners and you have reached people that are relevant and they're decision makers, but also bottom up in the sense that if we really work on futures literacy, then maybe more people will have the capacity to challenge this power dispute and capacity to challenge the choices that are being made. So I think it makes complete sense what you just said. And that's a dream for me, I guess, to have a future literate world where we could more easily challenge what's being chosen.
Just one sentence more. Before I joined this call, I looked at the website of the Global Solutions Summit. Apparently, I don't know if you know that one. It's a yearly event. It's a giant event, and Angela Merkel and the head of the EU and Guterres, everybody's speaking there. I went quickly through the participant list. I didn't see anybody that strikes me as a futurist in the widest sense. Maybe there's someone from the World Economic Forum, and we all know they do excellent scanning work and so on. But I didn't see anybody, honestly. So they're talking about the global solutions for the world, but there seemed to be no one with a foresight, future-thinking background. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I usually think it's the big shots are talking to each other about the future, but there's no one who maybe represents the foresight community in the widest sense. Over.
Yeah, and that's something that, because of course we're trying and we're making communities of the future here, but we know that there are people with more gravity, more significance in the field, people that are talking one-on-one with these people, with the big shots, let's call them. But maybe we could make a stand as communities. You know, we could knock on doors as communities of the future, and then not only one-on-ones, and that could strengthen the point of view or bring a more diverse point of view to the table. Just brainstorming here on one more task, yet one more task to save the future.
I want to add something about, like, because we're focusing on the future, and also focusing on the future is to live in the French. And I think that that's my mantra. And I think that Sophia just point out a very important topic, because during this pandemic, I realized that there was Facebook groups about people pretending to be ants. And that's a thing. And like, really, you see people posting a photo of a Cheeto, and they just put lift, and that's it. That's the purpose of the group, just to be an ant. Or people pretending to be boomers, and how they role play that part. So that's very interesting, and that's part of, like, also thinking about the future, like to live in the fringe, and how those for people means to be ants in a Facebook group, or what does it means to be a boomer in a Facebook, to represent a boomer. What are we learning there? And that's, I think that's what we need to see, like the fringe. We need to really look about what's happening out there, not just in our future space, but what's happening out there, and making us questions. I think that the most important thing about futures communities or future space, it doesn't matter what we are at. It's about asking us questions, where we are, what are the patterns that we are seeing, and how we can enhance these spaces to prepare or to face uncertainty in a certain way that we can be more participatory future, a more participatory future. So I think that what Sophia just said, it's like, it's a complement of what we have to do. And participatory futures, I think that it doesn't matter what community we are, it's to foster this intersection between future studies and the citizenship, like with the citizen engagement. So I think that that's our goal, and that should be our goal, to create this where does the ant group lives and how futures fit in that kind of communities? And I think that that's a question that I leave you guys.
Well, that's very funny because my pet project is called Fringe Futures. So far, there's only a music festival by that name, but hopefully in a little bit of time, I'll be able to explore some far lesser explored topics that I'm interested in. And that's the whole point. Like, there's people, I think the things that we talk about and the way that we talk about them are way up here. For most people, at least that's how I felt. But there are ways that you can bring conversations that are important to common people, for example, like gun control or defunding the police. These are ways that you can connect with communities and show them the relevance of futures. Those aren't the controversies that I'm talking about, but those are ways to connect and hopefully, raise awareness about futures literacy and why it's useful. So I'll keep you updated on Fringe Futures, and I'm going to find the ant group because that is the craziest thing I've heard. Well, I don't want to say crazy. That's the fringiest thing I've heard in a while. So I'm going to go search that up. Thank you, Abril.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And if I'm correctly, John, we're probably right at the end of the session. So I would love to thank you all for this and having one last quick round where everyone can say one word they would wish for the future of Futures community. And I just go around, I see the people, I think you see it differently, but I start with Michelle.
More transversal.
Okay, Bibi.
Cross collaboration.
Abril.
Fringe, I think. It should be a fringe.
Great.
Peace.
John.
Inclusive.
Majd, sorry.
Universal.
Sophia.
I would say it's not 2 words, less risk averse, more risky.
And Jost?
Sustainability.
Hey, mine would be experimental. And just
Yes,
on cue.
That's one word.
Thank you, everyone. Tanja, John, the conversation is lovely. I always love, I said this yesterday, meta conversations when you talk abstraction on abstractions. That is interesting, a community of communities of communities. So that it's getting it's like a chaos summer. If you've been into coding and visual coding, a chaos summer is when you see yourself in a mirror and it goes to the infinite and beyond. So that is when you zoom into the chaos. Is that when we go into meta conversation, that is very interesting because you discover incredible things, that experience of looking into the chaos. And you end up with a lot of control and ways to see the world and the reality in a completely different way. So thank you, everyone, for being here. It's been a super interesting conversation and seeing the path that you are taking and how you are all approaching to build a community of communities, actually. And to everyone else that is going in the summit, you have to stay just on the website. We are coming back just in about 2-3 minutes. And thank you, everyone.